Hello, my friend. I'm truly grateful you've decided to watch my video today, and it would bring me even more joy if you chose to subscribe to my channel. Your support genuinely makes a real difference to me. Let's begin. My name is Aaron, and before my world started to come apart, I had been married to my wife for 10 years. I made my living as a delivery driver for a mid-sized logistics company that served our region. It was never the kind of work that led to financial abundance. I earned around $34,000 a year, respectable for someone without a college degree, but nowhere near enough to build lasting security. Haley and I had met in our early 20s, married not long after, and spent the next decade trying to create a life together. Like many marriages, ours was a mix of bright, happy days and seasons of struggle. Money was a constant sore spot. We quarreled about it more times than I'd like to remember, and sometimes went days with hardly speaking, though there were still moments of warmth in between. We cherished the trips we had scrimped and saved for, enjoyed quiet Sunday mornings, and reveled in the pride of purchasing our first and only home together. That house became the centerpiece of our shared dream. We bought it in 2007, right at the height of what would later be called the housing bubble. Back then, nearly everyone believed that real estate prices would always climb, and our mortgage broker assured us we were making a sound investment. To make the purchase possible, we pulled together every dollar we could find. I emptied my savings, cashed in a modest 401k from a past job, and Haley used the small retirement account she had built up at her position with an insurance agency. By the time the deal closed, our reserves were gone, but we were officially homeowners. For the next 2 years, we lived in our modest 3-bedroom ranch on Maple Street. It was far from extravagant, but it belonged to us. I spent weekends tackling small home improvement projects, and in 2008 we even hosted Thanksgiving for both sides of our family. They were not grand events, just the small milestones that give meaning to a shared life. Still, the financial pressure was unrelenting. The mortgage payment was higher than we had anticipated, especially once property taxes and insurance were factored in. Then, in 2009, the housing market collapsed, and our home's value plunged far below what we still owed. The recession touched every corner of the economy. I managed to hold on to my delivery job while others were laid off, but the stress never eased. The work itself became grueling. As companies cut costs, there were fewer packages to deliver and more drivers competing for routes. My employer had laid off 3 drivers in 2008, which meant the rest of us had to cover larger territories for the same pay. On some days, I drove over 200 miles through multiple counties, delivering to businesses that were barely keeping their doors open. Everywhere I went, I saw for lease signs, shuttered restaurants, and factories that had cut their workforce in half. It felt like the economy was unraveling before my eyes. I picked up extra shifts whenever possible, even on weekends, yet it never seemed enough to get ahead. The irony didn't escape me. I was delivering products to people who probably couldn't afford them, while Haley and I lived in a house that was beyond our own means. The entire situation felt built on debt and blind optimism. Haley started working later hours, and when she was home, our conversations often spiraled into arguments. Minor disagreements turned into major blow-ups, and the larger conflicts began to feel like they could end the marriage entirely. We fought over the thermostat because heating oil prices had skyrocketed. We clashed about grocery costs as prices rose week after week. We debated whether to repair the washing machine or limp along without fixing it. Every decision seemed to spark conflict because we never had any financial cushion to ease the tension. It didn't help that we saw our neighbors facing the same hardships. The Kellys, who lived 2 doors down, lost their house to foreclosure in late 2008. They had bought theirs just 6 months after we bought ours, paid even more than we had, and when he lost his job at the steel mill, they couldn't keep up with their mortgage. I helped them pack their moving truck on a cold, wet Saturday in December. The look in their eyes is something I'll never forget. They weren't only losing a home, They were losing their faith in the idea that hard work and playing by the rules would lead to a better future. Within a year of our move-in, 2 other houses on our street had been foreclosed on. For sale signs became a familiar sight, and property values kept sliding. We all knew we were trapped. Selling was out of the question. Our mortgages outweighed our home values. It was like sinking into financial quicksand. The harder you tried to climb out, the further you sank. Though we'd owned our home less than 2 years, it felt like we had already endured a lifetime of money troubles, and my marriage was straining under the weight. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in March 2009. I returned home after a long, exhausting day, thinking only about what to eat for dinner. Instead, I found Haley sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of her. When she looked up, her expression was one I had never seen before. She told me she wanted a divorce. She said she was done and that she planned to keep the house. I stood there stunned, trying to process her words. It was shocking enough that she wanted to end the marriage, but her claim on the house hit even harder. It was the only real asset we had, though it too was worth less than we owed. I asked why she believed she could take the only significant thing we owned together. Her answer was blunt. I couldn't afford a lawyer to stop her. That statement burned into my memory. She wasn't wrong, and we both understood it. My $34,000 income vanished quickly into mortgage payments, car loans, insurance, utilities, food, and daily expenses, leaving nothing for legal fees. Skilled divorce attorneys charged hundreds of dollars an hour, and drawn-out cases could drag on for months. I had looked into legal aid, but my income was just over the qualifying limit, and the waiting lists stretched for months. So I told her the only thing I could. You're right. I think she expected a fight, but I couldn't see the point. The numbers told the story as plainly as her words did. She had been putting money aside for this moment, probably for months, while I came home each day believing we were simply enduring a rough patch together. The end of our marriage didn't exactly blindside me. By the time we reached that stage, what we had was little more than a hollow shell, running on fumes for at least a year. What truly stunned me wasn't the divorce itself. It was her sudden insistence that the house should be hers alone. In my mind, if we ever parted ways, we would sell the place, settle whatever remained on the mortgage, and split the debt or equity evenly. The idea that she believed she could walk away with the property while leaving me with nothing revealed just how differently we'd seen our partnership. To her, it appeared I'd been nothing more than a name on the loan documents and a wallet for the bills while she pursued her own future. The property fight wasn't even the part that cut the deepest. What really hurt was learning that while I was working extra hours, scrambling to keep us financially stable, she had been quietly consulting with attorneys and preparing her departure. I'm certain she'd practiced that kitchen conversation long before it happened. I was moving pieces like it was a casual game of checkers, while she was executing a chess strategy I didn't even realize was in play. Just a week later, I was at my delivery truck loading boxes when a process server handed me the divorce papers. The man was polite and professional, but there's no dignified way to have your marriage legally dissolved in full view of your coworkers. A couple of them saw the exchange, and before the day was out, the news had spread across the depot. That's the nature of blue-collar workplaces. Everyone knows your personal business, and once they do, they're eager to weigh in. Later that day, my supervisor, Dean, called me into his office. Dean had spent over 2 decades with the company and had weathered his own divorce back in the early 2000s. Drawing from his experience, he advised me to keep the details of my situation to myself. As he put it, there's always someone ready to use another person's personal troubles as leverage when better routes or promotions come around. Dean also suggested I visit someone at the credit union to explore my financial options. He warned me that divorce could wreck my credit in ways I probably hadn't even thought of. That conversation opened my eyes to how unprepared I truly was for the road ahead. Until then, I'd barely considered credit ratings, asset protection, or the financial fallout that could come with the end of a marriage. Naively, I had believed that if Haley and I ever split, we could sit down like rational adults and reach a fair agreement over the property. Instead, I was thrown into a crash course on representing myself in court. When legal aid finally returned my call, I learned there was a 6-month wait list. All they could offer was a short consultation. The paralegal I met with didn't sugarcoat it. Walking into family court without legal representation, especially when the other side had an attorney, was like stepping into a gunfight armed with a pocket knife. She gave me a handful of basic forms, outlined the bare essentials, and wished me the best. My first hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in July. I arranged to take the morning off, which meant losing a day's pay, and arrived at the courthouse early wearing the only suit I owned, a navy one I'd purchased years before for job interviews. The family court was imposing, with marble floors and high echoing ceilings. I sat in the gallery watching other cases move through the docket. Haley walked in about 10 minutes before our hearing, and she wasn't alone. She had hired a local family law attorney. They took their place on the opposite side, reviewing an immaculate stack of paperwork. When our case was called, I walked to the defendant's table by myself, carrying nothing but a manila folder containing my handwritten notes and the forms I'd managed to file. The judge, a woman in her 40s or 50s, glanced from their side to mine, clearly noting the uneven matchup. Then the courtroom doors opened, and in walked another attorney, one I recognized immediately. It was my brother, Alan. We hadn't spoken in years, and I had never once thought to ask him for help. Seeing him heading toward my table left me stunned. I hadn't hired Alan Morrison. We hadn't even crossed paths in my adult life, let alone exchanged money for legal work. Yet he sat down beside me, opened his briefcase, and started organizing documents as if the whole thing had been arranged. When the hearing began, Alan introduced himself to the court as my counsel and formally entered his appearance. In an instant, the dynamic in the room shifted. Haley's attorney could no longer steamroll an unrepresented spouse. Every motion met a counter-motion. Every assertion was challenged with legal citations I'd never even heard before. When it was over, Haley stopped me in the hallway. She demanded to know how I could afford such an attorney, accusing me of hiding money and lying about my finances for years. Before I could get a word out, Alan spoke up. His voice was calm, almost casual. "He doesn't have to pay me. I'm his older brother. I'm guessing he never mentioned me while you were married." The expression on her face was unforgettable, pure disbelief. She hadn't even known I had a brother, let alone one who was a seasoned attorney. Alan and I had taken very different roads after high school. He'd won an academic scholarship, gone on to Penn State Law, and built a successful practice over 2 decades. I had gone straight to work, bouncing between jobs until I settled into driving deliveries. We'd stopped speaking after he slept with my girlfriend back then, and I swore we'd never have contact again. It turned out our mother had been the one to tell him about my divorce. Without hesitation, he saw it as a chance to mend the rift between us and stepped in. The next 6 months dragged on at the slow, exhausting pace of family court, draining both emotionally and financially. Haley's position didn't budge. She wanted the house, argued that she had contributed more money, and claimed my income was too unstable to keep up with the mortgage. Her attorney filed motion after motion, all aimed at securing sole ownership. Alan's defense was straightforward but unshakable. Pennsylvania law requires marital property to be divided equitably. The house had been purchased during the marriage, paid for with marital funds, and both our names were on the deed and mortgage. There was no prenup to change those facts. In the eyes of the law, Haley's claim to the home was no greater than mine. The court required that our house be formally evaluated, which meant hiring a certified real estate appraiser. It was one more cost stacked onto an already growing list of expenses, but it was unavoidable. Without an accurate market value, the settlement talks couldn't move forward. The appraiser spent nearly 3 hours combing through the property, recording its condition and features in detail. 6 weeks later, her written findings were submitted to the court, and the news was grim. The home we had purchased in 2007 had dropped below its original purchase price. The housing market downturn had hit our area hard, cutting roughly 10% from neighborhood values. With the mortgage balance still hanging over us, the truth was undeniable. We were upside down on the loan. We owed more than the house could fetch if sold. That single piece of information completely shifted the direction of the divorce negotiations. The judge reviewed both the appraisal results and the financial statements submitted by each side. Our shared assets were minimal: a home with negative equity, 2 cars, just over $3,400 in bank accounts, and retirement funds totaling less than $8,000. A decade of marriage had left us with virtually nothing to divide. The judge's initial proposal was straightforward on paper but impractical in reality. If Haley wanted to keep the house, she would have to compensate me for my share of its negative equity and refinance the loan in her name alone. In other words, she would end up with sole ownership, but also the entire mortgage on a property worth significantly less than the debt attached to it. From a purely financial standpoint, the arrangement made little sense for her. She'd be saddled with a home that carried more debt than value and be solely responsible for paying it off. But instead of walking away from that plan, Haley and her attorney escalated their demands. They wanted her to have the house outright, pay me nothing for my share, and still keep me on the hook for half the mortgage, even though I would have no claim to the property at all. It was an unreasonable request that no fair-minded court would approve, yet her lawyer pushed it anyway. My attorney, Alan, countered with a clear and legally sound alternative. If no buyout could be reached, then the court should order the property sold, apply the proceeds toward the mortgage, and split any remaining debt evenly. Given the negative equity, both of us would still owe money afterward, but at least the obligation would be shared equally. This solution was rational, but her legal team spent the next 3 months fighting it. They filed motions to block the sale, claiming Haley had invested more in the home's upkeep, that her emotional connection to the property outweighed mine, and that my irregular earnings made me an unsuitable homeowner. Alan dismantled each argument with documented proof, bank statements, maintenance receipts, and relevant case precedents. By November, 8 months after the divorce case began, the judge handed down her final ruling. The house was to be sold. Any shortfall between the sale price and the mortgage balance would be divided equally. We had 90 days to put it on the market, with the court monitoring the process to ensure compliance. We hired a real estate agent experienced in distressed and court-ordered sales. In a stronger housing market, we might have invested in minor repairs to improve the asking price, but with a strict 90-day timeline and no extra funds, that wasn't an option. The property was listed slightly below the appraised value to encourage quick offers. Within 4 weeks, 2 offers came in, both under asking price. After some negotiation, we accepted one from a young couple eager to buy their first home, who managed to secure financing despite the shaky economy. The closing took place on a dreary February morning in the title company's conference room. Haley and I sat at opposite ends of a long table, signing page after page to relinquish the home we had once bought with optimism just 3 years earlier. Once the mortgage payoff, realtor commissions, title insurance, and taxes were deducted, there was still an unpaid balance, and we both walked away in debt. Haley was furious with the outcome, and I could understand why. She had entered the process expecting to keep the house, only to end up with half the debt and the need to start over somewhere else. She had also spent thousands in legal fees, money that could have been used for something far more beneficial. Her entire strategy had unraveled. As for me, I felt no resentment. Our marriage had ended long before the legal paperwork began. For years, we had lived like strangers under the same roof, silently blaming each other for financial struggles and unmet responsibilities. The house itself had come to symbolize everything that had gone wrong: money stress, broken expectations, and the quiet accumulation of resentment. My brother, Alan, refused to take payment for his legal help, saying that family supports family. He joked that watching Haley's arguments collapse in court was payment enough. I offered to take him out to the best dinner I could afford, but he laughed and said, maybe one day when I was back on solid ground, we'd just grab a beer and talk. The apartment I moved into afterward was small but comfortable, one bedroom, a compact kitchen, and a living room that doubled as my workspace and entertainment area. At $550 a month, the rent was less than half of what my mortgage had been. For the first time in years, I could treat myself to an occasional dinner out, set aside money for emergencies, and even imagine taking a trip without months of financial anxiety. At first, I felt a flicker of guilt for enjoying the solitude. After so long as part of a couple, I had almost forgotten the relief of making choices without negotiation. The peace of a conflict-free home was worth more than I could measure. The frugal habits I'd developed during the marriage, careful budgeting, disciplined spending, made it possible to chip away at the remaining debt without fear. I felt a deep sense of gratitude toward Alan for all he had done, and the entire experience left me with a lasting lesson. Sometimes the things we cling to most fiercely are the very ones we're better off letting go. Haley had poured 8 months and thousands of dollars into fighting for a house that ultimately cost both of us money to sell. She was so determined to win that she never considered whether the prize was something worth having. In the end, I realized that freedom carries a price, but it's a price worth paying. That's where my story concludes. I'd welcome your thoughts in the comments, and if this story connected with you, I invite you to explore my other videos. Until next time, my dear friend.